Is there a difference between women and men?
What I can say is that the NCAA has rules in place. They've had rules in place for the last decade, and when this competition happened,
I'm going to try again.
the rules were clear.
Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? It's a yes/no question. Do you believe there's a difference?
Oh, I think that we're talking about this case with the NCAA.
No, I'm asking a question. Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? Most people could answer this very simply. I'm curious if you're willing to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just putting it into the context of the conversation that we're having. I think that there are definitions related to sex.
Is that a yes? So I'm trying to get a yes or no. I'm not trying to get a speech. Is there a difference between women and men? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Title IX was a landmark civil rights law. It helped create the incredible breadth of women's sports and girls' sports that we see across the country. I believe in girls' sports. I believe in women's sports. I'm the proud father of 2 daughters who are both athletes. I think participating in competitive sports is a wonderful thing for a young girl. I think it is a wonderful thing for a woman. And I think, unfortunately, today's Democrat Party has decided that women's sports and girls' sports no longer matters. And they're willing to push radical legislation designed to destroy girls' sports and women's sports. Ms. Gaines, I want to thank you for your courage. You are relatively young, but you have demonstrated incredible courage. And because you have dared to speak up, you have been demonized, you have been vilified. I saw when you were attacked by a leftist mob at San Francisco State University for daring to speak up. You had an incredible record as a swimmer at the University of Kentucky. You were a 2-time NCAA All-American. You were a 5-time SEC champion. You're an SEC record holder and a 2-time Olympic trial qualifier. But yet on March 27th, 2022, something changed. What happened on March 17th, 2022?
That's when Thomas and I raced in the 200 freestyle and again resulted in a tie.
And so you tied. What was the consequence of tying?
We went behind the awards podium where typically you're handed your trophy, you're marched out, you're named an All-American. And so we go back there and the official looks at both Thomas and myself and says, "Great job, but you guys tied. And we only have 1 trophy, therefore we're giving this trophy to Leah." And I question this and I say, why? And at first I shortened it in my testimony, but really he stumbled on his words. He didn't know how to answer this. And at first he's, well, we're just doing this in chronological order. To which I further pressed and I said, okay, well, what are you being chronological about? Because we tied. And if we're doing this off alphabetical order, G comes before T. So what are you being chronological about? To which this wasn't a script they had prepared for him. And he actually appreciated his honesty. He did say, we have to give the trophy for Leah because Leah has to have it for pictures. They've made that clear. Leah has to have the trophy for pictures. You can pose with this trophy, but you have to give yours back. You have to go home empty-handed. Leah Thomas takes the trophy home. End of story.
Now, let me ask you, as someone who's competed at the elite level, in your experience, is there a difference between women and men?
Of course. I think we learned this at a very young age, watching even 12 and unders play. Going through puberty causes irreversible advantage, that no matter the training, no matter the diet, no matter any alterable change you can make, will overcome that male advantage. Especially in sports like swimming, where lung capacity matters so much. Even something as silly as throat size, men have on average a 40% larger throat, which sounds like it's nothing, but when you're grasping for air, that 40% larger throat makes a huge difference in athletic success, not to mention height. You guys know the differences.
Ms. Robinson, do you agree with Ms. Gaines that there's a difference between women and men?
If the question is about trans women,
I'm just asking, is there a difference between women and men?
What I can say is that the NCAA has rules in place. They've had rules in place for the last decade, and when this competition happened,
I'm going to try again.
the rules were clear.
Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? It's a yes/no question. Do you believe there's a difference?
Oh, I think that we're talking about this case with the NCAA.
No, I'm asking a question. Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? Most people could answer this very simply. I'm curious if you're willing to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just putting it into the context of the conversation that we're having. I think that there are definitions related to sex.
Is that a yes? So I'm trying to get a yes or no. I'm not trying to get a speech. Is there a difference between women and men?
I think that there are definitions for biological sex.
Okay, so you're not answering that. Let me ask you this question then. Why do women's sports exist? If you can't define a difference between women and men, why not abolish women's sports and just tell little girls to swim with little boys and see who wins?
Oh, I'm simply saying that that sex is
My
different
question,
than gender.
Why
and I do believe that women's sports have a great
exist?
value. I mean, Senator, I'll tell you right
Ms.
now.
Robinson, please answer the question I'm asking you.
Absolutely.
Why do women's sports exist?
I think that there are so many positive benefits to sports.
But
I mean,
why have a separate
about
category for women? If there's no difference between women and men, why to have women's sports?
I'm saying that there's a difference between sex and gender, and that the NCAA has rules in place, which they have for the last decade.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter into the record an article from Duke Law called "Comparing Athletic Performances for the Best Elite Women to Boys and Men." And it goes through examining in 2017 the top records for women in the world in various track and field events. So, for example, in the 100 meter, the top record for women in the world was 10.71 seconds. Now, that record for the number one woman in the world in 2017 was, in the year 2017, broken by 124 boys under 18. In that same year, the record for the number one competing woman in the 100-meter dash in the world was broken by a total of 2,474 men. If the radical Democrat agenda to destroy girls' sports and women's sports succeeds, little girls will not have a chance to compete. So I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record.
Without objection. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues,
It began with a simple question that cut through the static like a siren. Is there a difference between women and men? Senator Ted Cruz, voice steady, eyes fixed, posed it to the president of the Human Rights Campaign. A yes or no stripped a flourish. And in that instant, the hearing, ostensibly about policy, became a referendum on reality itself. Moments earlier, Cruz had set the stakes in human terms. He spoke of Title IX as the backbone of opportunity, of young women whose lives bent toward discipline, competition, and the quiet dignity of winning something you earned. He spoke as a father. Then he turned to a witness who has lived the controversy in her muscles and lungs, Riley Gaines. Cruz recounted the night she tied in the 200 freestyle and was told the trophy would go to Leah Thomas for pictures, that she could pose with it, then hand it back and go home empty-handed. A tie on the scoreboard, a loss in the photographs. The symbolism was not subtle. Institutions managing optics first, fairness second. Gaines answered without hesitation. Yes, there is a difference between women and men. You learn it as a child on a field or in a pool, and you relearn it as bodies change. Hearts pumping harder, lungs drawing deeper, bones and levers moving with different force. One witness called it irreversible advantage. It wasn't theory. It was the memory of the last meters before the wall, when air matters more than rhetoric. Then came the exchange with the Human Rights Campaign. Again, Cruz asked for a straight line through the fog. Is there a difference? The answer that followed tried to reframe, to orbit, to build context. Rules, the NCAA, definitions of sex and gender, everything except the word yes. And so Cruz pressed. Why, if there is no difference, do women's sports exist at all? Why separate categories? Why the entire legal architecture of Title IX, if not to recognize something that every little girl with a stopwatch and a goal understands in her bones? The room tightened when Cruz moved from principle to proof. He asked to enter into the record a Duke Law analysis comparing top women's times with those of boys and men. The statistic that rang out: in 2017, the world's best woman in the 100-meter dash ran 10.71 seconds, and that time was surpassed by 124 boys under 18 in that same year, and by 2,474 men overall. Numbers are unsentimental. They don't shout. They don't insult. They simply sit there, unmoving, daring us to explain them away. This is the hearing's revelation, the collision between ideology and institution, between what a movement demands and what a meritocracy requires to remain trustworthy. Cruz framed it as protection for his daughters, but it is bigger than one family. It is about whether the American promise of equal opportunity is a real covenant or a malleable slogan, reinterpreted whenever politics insists that biology is problematic. Listen carefully to the structure of the moment. A senator recalls the creation of women's sports under federal law. He honors a female athlete for speaking when it became costly to do so. He recounts a trophy diverted for the sake of a camera lens. He asks an advocacy leader for clarity and is offered ambiguity. He answers ambiguity with facts, then returns to first principles. If women's sports have value, they must be protected by definitions that mean something. Not someday, not in context, but now. This is not cruelty. This is not erasure. It is the opposite. It is the insistence that recognizing reality is a form of respect. Respect for the young women who train before dawn, who tape ankles and ice shoulders, who race against limits and ask only for a fair lane. It is respect for Title IX itself, a statute that did not create the differences between the sexes, but tried to honor them with equal opportunity. The broader political context came into focus too. Cruz accused the modern Democratic Party of pursuing a radical agenda that dissolves the very category of women's sports. But beneath the partisan language was a constitutional question. When policy refuses to define what it regulates, can it be just? When the law is charged with safeguarding opportunities for women but declines to say what a woman is, the law becomes a stage set, elaborate, expensive, and hollow. And what of leadership? It is easy to confuse leadership with the performance of compassion. Real leadership is the courage to tell the truth when the truth will be punished. It is Riley Gaines reliving a humiliating moment so that future athletes won't have to. It is the steadiness of a senator who will be demonized for asking questions that used to be taught in elementary school science. It is the stubborn decency of saying that fairness is not a slur and boundaries are not hate. As the gavel passed and the next senator prepared to speak, the choice before the country felt unmissable. We can preserve a system where women's records, women's categories, and women's trophies are honored because they are earned. Or we can drift further into a politics that treats fairness as a negotiable variable, solvable by press release, photo op, or the right set of talking points. One path preserves faith in our institutions. The other replaces faith with suspicion and resentment, because when merit loses, trust dies. There are moments when a hearing is just a hearing, and there are moments when a single question peels back the paint and shows the grain of the wood beneath. Is there a difference between women and men? In that question lives the integrity of Title IX, the legitimacy of women's sports, and the promise we make to every girl who laces a shoe or dives into cold water before the sun. The answer you give, the answer our leaders give, will decide more than a scoreboard. It will decide whether the American idea of equal opportunity remains something young women can touch with their hands. This is not a culture war. It is a justice test. Protect the lane. Protect the records. Protect the truth. Subscribe to Liberty Congress of USA and help us keep the cameras pointed where the answers matter most.